The gate log came to me at the second bell of morning, the way all things requiring a decision came to me, on a runner's boot heels, with the particular urgency of someone who had decided the matter was too large for their authority and too small, they hoped, for mine. I was in the East Gallery, reviewing the season's tithe agreements when the runner arrived. I did not look up immediately. 13 years of governing Caldenmere alone had taught me that urgency was often a failure of proportion rather than a failure of circumstance, and that the best thing a king could do for a runner's nerves was to finish his sentence before acknowledging them. I finished the sentence. I looked up. "A woman at the gate," the runner said. "She gave her name as Riven. She gave her mother's name as Ilara." He said it the way you say a name that has been waiting in a room for a long time, carefully, as if the act of speaking it aloud might disturb something that had settled. I set the tithe agreements down. Ilara. 20 years was a long time, long enough for a name to go from spoken to whispered to not spoken at all, in the particular way that packs manage the things they would rather not remember. I had been 17 when Ilara was driven from Caldenmere. I had not yet taken the throne, my father still held it, and the council that surrounded him had its own arrangements, its own priorities, its own sense of what the pack could and could not afford to remember. I had stood in the great hall the day she left, and I had not been able to stop it. I had not had the authority. I had told myself this for 20 years, and it had never become less true, and it had never become less the thing I would undo if I could. "Bring her to the hall," I said, "and tell no one else until she is inside." The runner's face told me this instruction was already too late. I gathered my things and went to the great hall. She was already there when I arrived, which told me the runner had moved faster than I had, or she had. The great hall at second bell was not empty. Caldenmere's senior wolves gathered for the morning council at the third bell, and several of them were already in place, the way people who love power are always in place slightly ahead of time. Dorvin was among them. He was always among them. He had been among the senior wolves at every morning council I had presided over for 13 years, and before that at every council my father had presided over, and before that at councils I could only know from the record books. He was old, and he was permanent, and he had the specific quality of a man who had outlasted enough kings to believe he was part of the architecture. He was looking at the woman in the center of the hall. She was not what I had expected, which was my own failure of imagination. I had expected something like Ilara, whom I remembered as gentle and a little afraid, a woman made small by the thing the council had done to her. This woman was not small. She was travel-worn, her cloak dark with road dust, her boots the boots of someone who had come a long way on foot for the last portion of the journey. She stood with her feet planted in the center of the hall's stone floor, as if she had measured the room from the doorway and selected this position deliberately. She was holding a small iron-latched box, the kind used for ash-keeping, and she held it the way people hold the things they have carried very far, carefully, without ceremony, with the particular attention of someone who has not let it out of their hands for longer than they can say. She had her mother's jaw, her mother's directness in the set of her shoulders. And then she turned slightly, and I felt it. Not felt, wrong word. Felt suggests something gentle, something that happens to you gradually. What happened to me when she turned was not gradual. It was the difference between a room with no fire in the hearth and a room with a fire already built and burning. And the moment you walk through the door, you know the difference in your whole body before your mind has caught up. My mate Mark, cold for 13 years, the temperature of the stone floor in deep winter, went from cold to blazing in the time it took her to complete the turn. I did not show it. I was the Alpha King of Caldenmere, and I had 13 years of practice showing nothing I had not already decided to show. But my wolf, who had been as absent as a wolf can be without leaving entirely, was suddenly and completely present, and he was looking at this woman with an expression I had not seen from him in so long I had almost forgotten he was capable of it. I held still, I watched. Dorvin spoke first. He always spoke first. "This hall is for the pack's senior members," he said, with the particular tone he used for people he had already categorized. "If you have business in Caldenmere, the gatekeeper will direct you to the appropriate." "I have business in this hall," she said. Her voice was level, not defiant level, the way a statement of fact is level. "My mother was born in Caldenmere. I have come to lay her ashes in the pack's memory ground. That is her right by blood, and it is therefore the pack's business, and therefore the hall's business." There was a silence of the particular quality that happens when someone says a true thing, in a room that has been organized around the pretense that the true thing is not true. "Your mother's name," Dorvin said. "Ilara." The name moved through the hall the way a stone moves through water, a ripple that reached every wall and came back. I watched the senior wolves. I watched their faces do the thing faces do when something they buried surfaces without warning. Not guilt, exactly. The thing that lives underneath guilt when guilt has been lived with long enough that it has become a form of comfort. Dorvin straightened. "Ilara surrendered her place in this pack by her own choices," he said. "Her exile was lawful and recorded. There is no claim here." She looked at him, not with anger, I noted this, not with the heat of someone who had rehearsed this confrontation into a grievance, with the look of someone who had anticipated exactly this response and had already decided how to answer it. "My mother's place in the memory ground is not subject to a council decision," she said. "It was established by pack law before this council existed. Blood right to the memory ground is not revocable by exile, only by formal renunciation, signed by the individual herself. My mother signed no such document. I have the records." She did not produce the records. She did not need to. The confidence with which she stated it told everyone in the room that the records existed, and that she had read them many times. Dorvin looked at me for the first time. It was the look he used when he wanted my authority to resolve something in his favor. I had seen it many times over 13 years. I looked back at him without expression and said nothing. He looked back at her. "You will wait," he said. "The full council will address this matter at the proper time." "I have waited 20 years, she said. "My mother waited 20 years. I will wait until the third bell, when the full council is seated, and then I will state my case, and then the full council can make whatever determination it sees fit." She turned away from him, not dismissively, but with the economy of someone who had finished a piece of business, and she looked at me. She did not know who I was. This was apparent in the way she looked, not deferential, not guarded, simply direct, the way you look at someone who is standing in a room that you have some question about. "Is there somewhere I can wait that is not the middle of this floor?" she asked. Something happened in my chest that I had no name for. It was not the mate mark that was already burning steadily on my wrist. It was something older and smaller, something that had to do with the way she had stood in the center of that floor and held her ground, and then turned and asked the most practical available question. "The window bench at the far end," I said. "No one else is using it." She nodded, as if this were a perfectly ordinary exchange between two people of no particular consequence, and went to sit down. I went to my position at the head of the hall where my chair was, and I sat in it, and I held my wrist still under the council table so that the warmth of the mark, already visible as a faint amber luminescence through my sleeve, would not draw comment before I was ready for it. The third bell rang. The council settled. I watched her walk from the window bench to the hall's center for the second time, and she moved the way she had moved the first time, like someone who had measured the room and knew where she stood in it. She set the ash box on the bench beside her. She folded her hands. She looked at the council with an expression of prepared composure, and she began. She had done her research. This was immediately clear. She knew the pack law chapters and verses, not the way a person knows them who has read them once, but the way a person knows them who has read them many times in many conditions, who has thought about how they would be applied against her, and prepared for each application. She cited the blood right provision with its record date. She cited the exile protocols and their limits. She cited the 3 cases in Caldenmir's own records where exile had been challenged on the grounds of the blood right, and 2 of the 3 had been found in favor of the challenger. The council was not pleased. Not because she was wrong, I could see in the way their faces settled that they knew she was not wrong, but because being right in this hall, in front of this council on this particular matter, was a thing they had not arranged for. Dorvin let her finish, then he leaned forward. "Your mother," he said, with the careful precision of someone choosing a weapon, left Caldenmir having caused considerable disruption to a lawful arrangement between her pack and a senior member. The manner of her leaving reflected poorly on her character and on the blood she claimed. Whatever the technical provisions of the blood right law, this council has the standing to determine that the spirit of the law does not apply to. "My mother," Riven said, with a steadiness that silenced him mid-sentence, was 22 years old when she was presented to a council elder as a potential mate without her consent. She refused. She was told that her refusal would be managed. She left before it could be managed. The disruption to the arrangement was the direct result of the arrangement being made over her. The record of her exile lists no specific wrongdoing, only the phrase failure to fulfill pack obligations. I have read the record many times. That is what it says. There is no case here. There is only a wrong that has been called lawful for 20 years. The hall was quiet. I had been watching Dorvin. I watched his face do the thing it did when he had not been answered the way he expected and had not yet recalibrated. I watched the other council members watch him, the particular watching of people who know which way the room needs to go and are waiting for the strongest current to make it clear. I watched her. She was not afraid. She was not performing composure. She genuinely had it, the composure of someone who had been carrying this for a long time and had made peace with the weight of it well before she arrived. The ash box was on the bench beside her, and her hand was near it, not touching it, and that nearness told me everything about why she was here and what it had cost. My mate Mark was burning steadily enough now that the warmth had moved up my arm to my shoulder. My wolf was no longer merely awake. He was entirely engaged, in the way that he engaged with things that mattered, not with noise, but with the deep attention of something that recognizes what it has been looking for. Dorvin found his footing. He always found his footing. "The character of the exile," he said, and now his voice had the weight of a man who has decided to use the heaviest thing he has, "is not merely a technical matter. Ilara's behavior, her refusal of a lawful arrangement, her departure without the council's sanction, her subsequent life outside the pack, created a rupture that this pack spent years repairing. To welcome the result of that rupture into the memory ground is to suggest that the rupture was without consequence. That is not a message this council is prepared to send. The result of that rupture." The room knew what he meant. The room had always known what he meant, from the moment Riven walked in carrying her mother's name and her mother's jaw and her mother's refusal to be diminished by people who found her inconvenient. I stood up. I did not plan it, or rather, I had been planning it since the moment the runner said the name Ilara, and I had simply been waiting for the moment that most needed it. This was that moment. Every head in the hall turned. I walked from the head of the council table to the center of the floor. Not to the chair reserved for the king when he addresses the hall, to the actual center, the same stone floor she had stood on when she arrived, the position she had chosen because she had measured the room. I stood beside her. "I have a statement to make to this council," I said. "It is not about the blood right provision, which Riven has already established clearly and which this council will honor. It is about something else." I turned my wrist over, palm up, and pushed back my sleeve. The mate mark was not a faint warmth anymore. It was not a glow that could be attributed to the hall's candlelight if you were willing to look the other way. It was gold and unmistakable, a living sigil on my inner wrist that had been cold as river stone for 13 years and had not been cold since the moment this woman walked through the door. I heard the sound the hall made when it saw it. Not a gasp, something quieter than a gasp and more significant, the sound of a room recalibrating. I looked at Riven. She was looking at my wrist. Then she looked up at me, and her expression was not what I had expected, not shock, not overwhelm. Something more careful than that. Something that was feeling its way toward a conclusion rather than arriving at one all at once. My mate mark has been cold for 13 years, I said, loud enough for the hall to hear. It went from cold to what you see now in the time it took this woman to cross the threshold this morning. I have governed Caldenmere alone for 13 years. The pack has been patient. My wolf has been patient. A pause. He is finished being patient. The hall was entirely silent. I turned to face the council, Dorvin specifically, without conceding that I was addressing him specifically, because a king addresses the room, not the man. Riven's mother was driven from this pack by a council arrangement that treated a 22-year-old woman as a negotiating piece. The record calls it a failure to fulfill pack obligations. I call it what it was. I am calling it that now in front of this council because 20 years of calling it something else has not made it something else, and I will not govern this pack for another 20 years on the same evasion. I paused. I let it settle. The bloodright claim stands. The ash-laying will proceed tomorrow at dawn. And this woman, I did not use her name yet because her name was the last thing, the thing that sealed it, and it needed to land with the weight of a name spoken by a king in front of his pack, is my fated mate, and she is Caldenmere's Luna. If anyone in this hall has an objection to either statement, they will bring it to me privately, and I will hear it, and it will not change either statement. I turned back to her. She was looking at me with an expression I would spend a long time afterward trying to name exactly. Not gratitude. She had not come here for rescue, and she did not wear gratitude the way people wear it when they feel it as debt. It was something cleaner than gratitude. Recognition, perhaps. The look of someone who has been in a room for a long time where no one would say the true thing, and someone has finally said it. Riven, I said, and my wolf was entirely present in that word, in the way of something that has been waiting a very long time to say a name it already knew. Will you stand here? She looked at me for a long moment, not calculating, taking stock. The way she had taken stock of every room she walked into, measuring it from the doorway before she chose her position. Then she took one step so that she stood beside me fully, shoulder level with my arm, facing the council. I looked at the council. Dorvin was the last to lower his head. He was always last. It was the one consistency I could count on from him, that he would hold out the longest and then do the thing everyone else had already done, in the particular way of someone who needs you to see that he considered not doing it. He lowered his head. He held it there. The hall bowed. She did not look at them. She looked at the ash box on the bench, and something moved in her face that was not composure and was not its absence. It was the movement of a person who has carried something a very long way and has just been told they can put it down. I did not say anything. There was nothing to say that the hall had not already heard, and there was a time for a king's voice and a time for silence, and this was the time for silence. We stood there until the hall's bow had held long enough to mean what a bow is supposed to mean, and then I let the council disperse, and I did not let them approach her, and when the hall had cleared I sat down on the bench. She had been assigned to wait on, and she sat beside me, and we were quiet together in the manner of two people who have just been through something significant and are still inside it. You knew who I was before they told you, she said after a while. It was not a question. The runner told me your name and your mother's name, I said. I knew your mother. I was 17 when she left. I was not able to stop it then. She was quiet, absorbing this. She never came back, she said. She always meant to. She told me she would come back when it was safe. She used that word, safe. A pause. She died before it was safe. I know, I said. I'm sorry. She would have come back for the memory ground herself, Riven said. She talked about it. She knew it was her right. She didn't have what I have. What do you have? She thought about it. I have nothing left to lose, she said. She still had me. I don't have anyone who needs me to be careful. I thought about this for a long time. It had the quality of something true that is also something to be changed. After tomorrow, I said, that may not be accurate. She looked at me. Then she looked at my wrist, where the mate mark was still visible, quieter now, not blazing but present, the way the warmth of a fire persists in a room after the fire has been banked. The mark, she said, how does it work? What does it mean for the person it marks toward? I told her. I had told no one in 13 years because there had been no one to tell. The mark had been cold, and explaining a cold mark to people who asked about it was its own kind of loneliness. I told her what the old pack teaching said, which was that the mark recognized the soul it was made for, and that the recognition was not a compulsion but a knowing. I told her what 13 years of cold had felt like, which was not painful exactly, more like a room where something should be and is not. I told her what the morning had felt like, which was the opposite. She listened the way she listened to everything, with complete attention, without interrupting, without performing the listening. And it goes both ways, she said when I had finished, not quite a question. The bond is felt by both, I said. What the other person feels and when and how strongly, that is their own experience to name. She nodded slowly. She looked at her hands and then at the ash box, and then at the long amber light from the hall's high windows falling across the stone floor. I came here to do one thing, she said. I came here to put my mother's ashes in the ground where they belong and to say her name where it should have been said a long time ago. That's what I came for. Yes, I said. I didn't come here for anything else. I know, I said. A long pause. The hall was very still around us. Outside, the river plain was waking up. I could hear the distant sounds of the settlement beginning its morning, a thing I heard every day, and which today sounded different in a way I could not articulate. I'll need to think, she said. Take all the time you need, I said. The bond doesn't require urgency, it requires certainty. That's not what the stories say. The stories are written by people who find urgency romantic, I said. The bond itself is patient. It waited 13 years for me. It will wait as long as you need. She looked at me, and something in her face shifted, not softening exactly, but opening the way a room opens when you let more light in. My mother would have liked you, she said. I would have liked to know her better, I said. I knew her for a season before the council's arrangement was set in motion. She had a way of saying things plainly without making them feel harsh. You do too. She taught me that, Riven said. She said the harshness is in the thing, not in the saying of it. Saying it plainly is a kindness. I thought about this. I thought about Dorvin in the hall and the 20 years of careful language around what had happened to Alara, and the way that care had been for the comfort of the people doing the wrong rather than the person wronged. She was right, I said. Dawn came early at this time of year in Caldenmere. The memory ground was at the valley's edge, where the river bent and the old trees grew thickest, their roots deep enough that the ground held even in flood years. The pack's dead were marked there with stones, and between the stones there was grass, and in the early light the grass held the dew and caught its silver. I had arranged for the groundkeeper to mark a place the evening before. I had also arranged, without announcing it, for the full senior council to be present, not at my invitation, at my instruction. There was a difference, and I needed them to feel it. They came. Dorvin came last, which was consistent. Riven stood at the marked place with the ash box, and she did not speak for a long moment, looking at the ground, and then she knelt and opened the box and laid her mother's ashes in the opened earth the way you lay something down that you have been carrying so long it has become part of how you hold yourself, and now you have to learn to hold yourself differently. She did not cry. She held herself very still, and her lips moved, and whatever she said quietly, for her mother and not for the council standing 10 paces behind her, or the king standing 2 paces to her left. When she had finished, she stood, and the groundkeeper sealed the earth, and the council witnessed it, and the thing was done. She straightened. She looked at the stone the groundkeeper had set, a simple river stone, flat and gray, the kind the memory ground used for everyone, and then she looked at me. "I would like her name on the stone," she said, "her full name." "It will be done today," I said. She nodded once, and there was something in the nod that was not just acknowledgement. It was the nod of a person completing a chapter, turning a page, arriving at a place where the next thing can begin. The council dispersed. I did not dismiss them. I simply stopped looking at them, and they understood. Dorvin paused as he passed. He did not speak. He looked at the stone, and then he looked at me, and then he walked on. I had said everything that needed to be said to him in the hall, and he had heard it, and the bow he had given had meant what it was supposed to mean. There was nothing left between us that required words. I stood with her in the memory ground until the sun was fully up, and the dew had lifted, and the river sound filled the valley, which was the particular full sound of a river in good water, unhurried and absolutely certain of where it was going. "Thank you," she said finally. "There is nothing to thank me for," I said. "What happened in that hall this morning was 20 years overdue. I should have had the authority to do it sooner." "You didn't have the authority," she said. "You said that." "No," I said, "not then. But I have it now, and I used it, and the only regret I have is the distance between now and then." A pause. "Your mother should have been here herself. She should have had this herself." "She did have it," Riven said. "Not like this, but she had it differently." She looked at the stone. "She told me who she was. She never stopped being who she was. They couldn't take that from her, whatever they called the exile." A pause. "She used to say the pack can call you whatever it wants. What you actually are is a different matter entirely." I thought of the mate mark, and of 13 years, and of the way it had blazed on sight of this woman and had not diminished since, and of the fact that the bond had always known what the pack was still catching up to. "She was right," I said again. The walk back from the memory ground to the great hall was a quarter of an hour at the easy pace we set. The valley was wide enough here that you could see the river on one side and the settlement's edge on the other, and the morning was that particular mid-season morning that feels like an argument for being alive, clear air, long light, the sound of work beginning at the far edge of hearing. Halfway back she said, without any particular preamble, "I don't have anywhere I need to be." I waited. "I came here for one thing," she said, "and it's done, and I don't have anywhere I need to be next." She glanced at me. "That's not a statement about the bond. I'm still thinking about the bond. That's a statement about my situation." "Then stay for a while," I said. "Caldenmere is not the place it was 20 years ago. Not entirely. It still has work to do, but it is not the same council." "You're still in it," she said. "Dorvin." "Yes," I said. "He is permanent, and I have been governing around him. I stopped governing around him this morning." She was quiet for a moment. "You stopped governing around him because of me." "I stopped governing around him," I said, "because what he said required it. You were the occasion. The thing itself was 20 years overdue." She considered this. "That's a very careful distinction." "I'm a careful man." "I noticed," she said, and then a beat later, "I'm not careful." "I know," I said. "You walked into a hall full of wolves who were ready to tell you no, and you cited chapter and verse of pack law at them without blinking." "My mother taught me the law before she taught me anything else," she said. She said, "Know the rules of any room you walk into. Know them better than the people who made them. Your mother was a very practical woman." "Yes," she said, and she smiled, the first full smile I had seen from her, brief and real, something she hadn't decided to perform but that had simply arrived. She was. We walked the rest of the way in a comfortable silence, which was the kind of silence that happens between two people when neither of them feels the need to fill the space with noise, and which told me more about who she was than the hour in the hall had. At the hall's door she stopped. "I'll stay a week," she said, "and then I'll decide." "A week is good," I said. "You'll give me honest information about the pack, about Caldenmere, about what it actually is, not what it presents itself as." "Yes," I said, "including the parts that are still wrong." "Especially those," I said. She looked at me for a long moment, taking stock, the way she always took stock, measuring from the doorway before she chose her position. "All right," she said. She went inside, I followed. The great hall was empty at this hour, the morning light falling at a low angle across the stone floor, and the memory of what had happened here 2 hours ago was still in the room, the way significant things stay in rooms, not visible, but present, a change in the quality of the air. I sat at the head of the council table and worked through the tithe agreements I had abandoned when the runner came with her name. They required attention. The season's business did not pause for matters of destiny, which was perhaps its own kind of mercy, work as ballast, as continuity, as the thing that reminds you the world is still the same world and is also completely different. At the midday bell I heard her footsteps in the gallery above. I did not look up. I worked. At the second bell of afternoon, a junior council member knocked and entered and left a report on the eastern boundary markers, which I initialed and returned. At the third bell, she came into the hall. She sat across the table from me at the far end, the distance of the full council table between us, and she had something in her hands, a small, worn book, pages soft with use. "My mother kept this," she said. "She brought it from Caldenmere when she left. It's a pack almanac from the year she was born." She set it on the table. "I thought you might want to know it exists. It has some history in it that your records might not." I looked at the book. I would be grateful to read it. "She wanted it to come back here," Riven said. "She didn't want to bring it herself because she thought it would be used against her, proof that she'd taken something. But she wanted it to come home." I reached across the table and picked it up. It was light, and the cover was worn smooth in the way of a book that has been handled with care for a long time. I set it carefully to one side. "It's home," I said. She nodded. She sat for a moment more, and I could see her thinking, not the careful, strategic thinking she had done in the hall, but something quieter, more personal. "You said the bond doesn't require urgency," she said, "that it's patient." "Yes." "And it felt to you, this morning, like something that had been waiting." "Yes." "And now it feels settled," I said, "as if something that was incomplete is complete. As if a door that was open has been closed properly." I paused. "Not closed as in ended, closed as in the room is now whole." She looked at her hands, then at the book on my side of the table, then at me. "My mother used to say that the pack's memory ground was the most honest place in Caldenmere," she said. "She said the dead don't perform for anyone. They just are what they were." "She was right about that too," I said. "She's in the most honest place," Riven said, "and her name is on the stone." A pause. "She would have said that's enough." "Is it enough for you?" She thought about this for a long moment, the kind of thinking that has earned the silence it asks for. "It's a beginning," she said. "It's what I came for. What comes after," she glanced at me, "what comes after is something I'm still deciding." "Take your week," I said. "Walk the valley, see Caldenmere as it is." "Will you show it to me?" "If you want me to." "I think I do," she said. And then, With the directness she seemed unable to help, which I was already finding was one of her most useful qualities. I think the bond is not the only reason I want you to. I set the tithe agreement down. Then we'll start tomorrow, I said. Early, before the council's third bell. The Eastern Valley in the early light is worth seeing. My mother mentioned the Eastern Valley, she said. She said it was the best thing about this place. She was right, I said. I'll show you why. She stood and gathered herself to leave, and then paused at the doorway. Aldrich, she said, my name plain, with the ease of someone for whom names are practical tools rather than performances. My mother would have called what you did this morning brave. I don't know if it was brave. It seemed to me like it was just true. Those are sometimes the same thing, I said. Sometimes, she agreed. She went. The hall was quiet, and the late light was long and golden, and the pack almanac from the year of Alara's birth sat on my side of the table, worn soft with the handling of a woman who had carried it across 20 years of exile and sent it home the only way she could through her daughter, who had stood in the center of this floor and refused to be told that the true thing was not true. I would have her name spoken in this hall, not as an exile, not as a difficult memory, as the woman who raised Caldenmir's Luna and who had been right about everything, and whose daughter had her jaw and her directness and her refusal to be made small by people who found her inconvenient. Her name would be spoken with honor in Caldenmir from this day. It was a very small thing and a very large thing at the same time, the way most true things are. I went back to the tithe agreements. The world was the same world. It was also, in the ways that mattered, completely different. And my mate mark, which had been cold for 13 years, was warm in a way I had almost forgotten warmth could feel. Not blazing, not urgent, just present, the way a fire is present in a room where someone you love has come home.